Andrew had never seen anything in his career that even compared to the scene outside of the pop star's house. As a young PC, he had been sent to football games as part of his training, occasionally having to separate rowdy or drunken fans. One occasion bordering on a riot after an FA Cup final, but even the crowds there were less ravenous than the one gathering outside Hyde Park. The press were in a frenzy. While Andrew had never really heard of the victim nor her girl group, the way the media were reacting made him wonder just what he had been missing. Was she part of some new craze, much like there had been for Elvis and the Beatles? That's what it seemed like to him. It was as if this was the most exciting, newsworthy thing to have happened since the deaths of Elvis, John Lennon, and Michael Jackson. More police officers had arrived, but they were having trouble holding back photographers who wanted to get up to the flat to take pictures of the corpse. Microphones, tape recorders, video cameras, and mobile phones with video recorders were being held to the faces of anyone seen leaving the crime scene. Shouting and screaming from the dozens, maybe even hundreds of journalists gathering was beginning to melt into one giant wall of noise, no one question coming through louder than the other. So much for a quiet day at work, Andrew thought. The siren of an approaching ambulance grew louder, but as the flashing lights came into view they suddenly stopped drawing closer, the crowds of people lining the street making it impossible for the vehicle to get through. Andrew watched as Rachel ran to her unmarked car parked just behind the first row of photographers. One man had climbed onto her bonnet, trying to see above the crowd, but quickly jumped down as Rachel threw her arm out at his leg, threatening to trip him. Opening the boot of the car, Rachel reached into the space, retrieving a large bag like a hold all used for holidays. Slamming the boot shut and making sure to lock the car, she headed back toward Andrew, unzipping the bag just a few feet away from him. "Here, use this to try and part the crowd to let the ambulance through. If that doesn't work, I have another little trick up my," Rachel said with a smile, handing him a loudspeaker. He stepped forward, putting the speaker to his lips, hoping he would be heard over the commotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we respect your right to be here to pay your respects, but if you would please be courteous enough to let the ambulance through, it would be greatly appreciated," Andrew called into the speaker. A few people gathered at the front of the crowd moved to the side, but not enough people moved to let the ambulance get through. Andrew repeated his request, being careful not to speak too harshly for fear of upsetting the crowd, which was already bordering on out of control. No one was listening. He looked toward Rachel as if to ask her what to do next. She smiled at him and nodded. He knew that meant he had to prepare himself to act once she made the next move. Making eye contact with the driver of the ambulance, Andrew nodded to him, holding up a finger indicating that the situation would hopefully be sorted out in a minute or so. "Get ready for this. Strictly it's against the rules, but under the circumstances I think we'll be able to get away with it," Rachel said, reaching back into her bag. Andrew gasped when he saw what she was about to do. Dropping the bag by her feet, Rachel raced forward toward the crowd, holding a fire extinguisher. Tugging on the hose and squeezing the trigger, the foam blew out into the crowd, covering the people blocking the path of the ambulance. The crowd were enveloped in the fog, coughing and spluttering as the contents of the extinguisher got into their mouths and up their noses. When the cloud dispersed, there was a big enough gap in a sea of people for the ambulance to pull through. The driver took the opportunity, quickly setting the vehicle in motion, driving as close to the flat as possible and positioning the back doors as close to the stairs as the space would allow. The ambulance workers rushed to the back doors, throwing them open. They quickly retrieved a stretcher with a body bag, dashing upstairs and into the flat, ushered by a member of the forensics team. "I can't believe you just opened a fire extinguisher on a crowd of people," Andrew said as Rachel came back to stand by his side. "What else was I going to do? They weren't going to move. This way I didn't actually get physical with them. They could still sue if any of them are asthmatic." "And you think anyone is going to take the side of someone who was blocking the path of an ambulance? Maybe when the person they're coming to collect is already dead?" "You worry far too much. If someone sues, they sue. I was just doing my job." "Yes, but as your superior, I'm supposed to keep you in line." "Oh, please. If my husband can't keep me in line, then you've got no chance." They both chuckled as Rachel took the extinguisher away in the bag, zipping it back up. Moments later, the ambulance workers appeared in the door of the apartment carrying the pop star's body concealed inside the black body bag. As they began carefully making their way down the steps, the crowd surged forward, almost breaking through the barrier created by what appeared to be the entire working police force of London, who had all gathered on Rachel's orders. Almost breaking into a sprint, the ambulance workers hurried to the open back doors of the ambulance, flashes from photographers' cameras almost blinding them as they placed the stretcher carrying the body into the back and close the doors. Moving back toward the crowd which had reformed across the road, Rachel held out her arms to direct traffic. The stunt with the fire extinguisher had either gained her the respect or the fear of the crowd, as they quickly parted, allowing the ambulance workers to jump back into the vehicle and speed off down the street with their sirens blaring. "Right, come on, let's get going," Andrew said, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder as she watched the line of people chased after the ambulance. "We need to get out of here now before things get any worse. I've informed that young PC of what we needs to do. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders, so if he copes well here, we might use him later. In the meantime, we need to get this murder solved as quickly as possible, because if we don't, those vultures will never let us hear the end of it."